No, everybody hear me? Recording.
No, yeah, that's fine. It's working now? Excellent. Okay, well, that's probably a good sign that they're recording, and that means we can go ahead and get started. I'm pleased to introduce Dr. Paul Lisnek. Dr. Lisnek is one of the most sought-after and respected trial consultants and lecturers today. He holds both a law degree and a doctorate in speech communications, and has extensive background in litigation, communication, education, writing, and ethics. Dr. Lisnek has formerly served as Assistant Dean of Loyola School of Law in Chicago and has taught at Pepperdine's Law School, University of Illinois, DePaul University, and as lecturer for Barbary Bar Review on professional responsibility. He has served as a jury expert for NBC News and has been a legal and political expert for CNN, Fox, NPR, Anderson Cooper 360, and Court TV. He has authored several articles and 12 books. Dr. Lisnek now anchors CNN headline news channels Newsmakers and Comcast Political Update. He is commissioner with the Illinois Attorney Registration and Disciplinary Committee. He is also executive director of Barbary's Law School Prep Program and CEO of Decision of Analysis, a firm specializing in trial consulting, which has worked with Enron, Whitewater, O.J. Simpson, among others. Currently, he lectures across the country to bar associations, corporations, and government agencies, educating and discussing with his audiences such topics as negotiation, depositions, courtroom advocacy, public speaking, and communication skills. The focus of his presentation today is the critical ability to relate effectively to clients, law firm partners, judges, and other professional contacts. I'm honored to present him to you this morning, Dr. Paul Lisnek.
Thank you, Julia. Thank you, and good morning. Now, for those of you who were with us in the panel session, which was absolutely excellent, and I'll probably reflect off of some of those points this morning, because there were so many good things made, that it was about the power of being a leader and leadership and how that plays out as we pursue our professions. But a different focus here, and I should probably just debrief you, which is we have a mixed program of lots of Duke students here, of course, but there are also some lawyers here because this one's getting CLE credit. So therefore, my comments are going to be, I just want to say that so that you know, my comments will be both for practitioners, but also for those of you who are students, as I'll try and cross that line. Yes, smart thinking. Invite the lawyers. Yes. Where are the lawyers? We're here for CLE. Some of you around. All right. Thanks for being here. Okay. If you're hiring, let these students know in case they might be looking for a job. You never know. Well, I'm going to talk about communication strategies and add some additional material to the great points being made by the panel this morning. And as I was sitting there, I almost wanted to keep jumping up and saying, yes, that's just so right on, because they talked about, think about the folks, first of all, what's brought you here. And those of you watching this in the lounge outside who are too chicken to come in, where are you? I see a few out of it. But anyway, the whole point of being here, you pretty much made a commitment. You've said, look, I want to see what it means to be a leader, what it means to have to provide leadership, and those are different concepts. There are leaders, and there are people who provide leadership. Leaders provide leadership, but some of you have the ability to do so in a task-oriented way. Some of you do it in a maintenance-oriented way, and so that's huge. Look at the lens. Can you make wine in that when you're not using it as a lens, like store wine? It looks like. Oh, they won't like this. What, is that heavy? Oh, okay. All right. Yeah. Never seen a lens that big. Is it like really close-up stuff? No? Okay. She said, no, leave me alone. I'm just here to take pictures. Why are you bothering me? Anyway, so what I'm going to do is provide some framework for you and some really practical stuff as we go on. I think you'll find fun. And if while I'm talking, I invite you to just join in. If you have questions or comments, it's perfectly fine. Just raise your hand and do that. If this were Stone's concert, you'd all be much further down in the room. And so if you want to move down as we go on, feel free to do that as well. But there's also going to be an ethics component to this. As Julia told you, part of my life is I've been a disciplinary commissioner, ethics commissioner for 20 years in Illinois. And so I want to present this, and I think our lawyers get some ethics credit out of this. So I want to present this also as an ethical piece, because we have to have that concern in almost everything we do. And over the 20 years of cases I've been dealing with, sometimes it's amazing, it would amaze you, at what sometimes lawyers are doing, what they're thinking. When they sort of get in trouble. Okay, like my favorite, which was the lawyer who got pulled over by a cop. He had been drinking, but that's not why he got pulled over. He was pulled over because he was dragging a dead horse on his car. And And he didn't know that was illegal. I didn't actually know that was illegal, but you cannot, there's a bonus point, you cannot drag a dead horse attached to your car when you're driving down the street, not in Chicago anyway. And so the cop pulled him over and said, "What are you doing?" And he looked and said, "Officer, I'm sorry, but would you like a beer?" This was just getting worse and worse with every moment. Don't offer a cop a beer when you've been pulled over as well. So, but goes on. Now, of course, he dealt with his legal issues, but the part for us is we found out about it because he was a lawyer, and so that kind of thing gets reported. And you do wonder, what are you thinking? Because as a lawyer, and the panel made such a great point of this, you know, we are proud to be lawyers. We have accomplished a lot to get to the point of being a lawyer, and sometimes you just don't want to do stupid stuff like that. And it turns out the horse had died, and he was helping a friend by getting rid of it. But we have the issue of the law as a profession versus the law as business. And those are two closely related components because, of course, if you're a partner of a law firm, if you're dealing with those issues, you are concerned about the nature of the business of the law. But we are all, and maybe certainly in the mindset of students, concerned about this as the profession as well and where it is we go as a profession. The panel talked this morning, and I'll reiterate, I'm always very bothered by attacks on the profession and people that, you know, make fun of lawyers or people who don't raise their heads high proudly when somebody says, "What do you do?" and we're almost ashamed to say we're a lawyer. Why would you be? I mean, again, this is a profession of great pride. It takes a lot to get to this point, and the reality of it, which is true, no matter, even if people are hesitant to show an appreciation of the law as a profession, they love their lawyer, and they need that person who represents them. And so really it's about understanding our responsibilities as professional, but also as a business. And I think they come into conflict sometimes. So I'm going to talk about that a bit, but get into some pretty practical communication skills that I think you will find of assistance to you as you go on. As lawyers, we do serve two masters. I mean, we have the client who is, if you expect to get money and a paycheck and survive, is a key master, but everything always being done within the ethics rules. Over the course of your career, you may have clients who will ask you to do something that you say, you know, I just can't do that. It just that bribing jurors, not a good thing to do here. And so we have to be very concerned about the ethics rules. We are lawyers 24/7. And one of the things that the lawyers know, and those of you when you get to ethics and or see me in the MPRE time will know, you don't take off your lawyer's hat. You're a lawyer 24/7. It doesn't count that I'm not practicing law now. I'm in a bar. I'm having a drink with friends. And so getting in a barroom brawl, that can't get me in trouble. Sure it can. You're a lawyer 24/7, and you never take off that lawyer's hat. And anything you do that can reflect on your character and your ability to practice law is something the profession, which is a self-regulating profession, we are lawyers governing other lawyers, is something that you are responsible for. And so from the moment you entered this law school, speaking to the students, you know, it is critical that you think about the responsibilities that are placed on you, that your clients will expect of you as you go on. Why is it that some of the professors do things that they do or give you a hard time in class? It's all because they're thinking about the future for you. Not that this would happen here, but I know of a professor at another school in Florida, actually. And what he does, if students are late to class, he actually has the doors locked. He doesn't allow them in. And the students go up and complain to the dean saying, you know, but I pay his salary. And, you know, and the dean sometimes will say, but you know what, you need to be on time to class, right? And one of the panelists before talked about the fact that when things go wrong, it's very easy to put the blame elsewhere. It's never on us. It's never our responsibility. The truth is, we have that responsibility. And what your professors are doing, speaking to the students, is getting you ready for what is a very tough profession. Come to class and not be prepared, and why should you suffer? Because guess what's going to happen to you when you were sitting at a table negotiating a critical deal along with some Skadden lawyers on the other side of the table, and you're not prepared. They're not going to say, oh, did you have a rough that? You went to the Duke game? Oh, did you? Yeah, I understand. Listen, we're going to go easy on you, all right? We won't deal with any of the small print in the agreement. we'll deal with the big words because I can see your eyes are a little bloodshot. That's not going to happen. They're going to fillet you. They're going to just clean up, walk into court. Judge, I'm sorry I'm late. It wasn't me. It's the traffic, the buses, the taxis, it's everything but me. You should see the and the judge says, counsel, I'm not quite sure why you're even talking to me because I dismissed your case a half an hour ago when I called it and you weren't here. Judge, I pay your salary. Now you're in jail. Now it's contempt. And so again, it's trying to instill some of the important values in here, which I do with maybe a bit of humor, but it's real. And what I'm talking about is real. So we're serving the client, but we're also serving the ethics code that governs us. You know, I use Rodney King's now famous quote there, which is, can't we all just get along? I don't put this up here as a comment about race relations and all that. It's useful in that context. But here I'm talking about this in the world of lawyering. If Rodney King were a lawyer or had become a lawyer, he could say this as well. This is the number one concern, not my number one concern, as you study problems within the profession and read the studies and all of that. The number one issue is civility among lawyers. It's why the profession has done so much in modifying ethics rules and oftentimes local civil procedures rules to basically have sanctions, make it difficult for lawyers to get away with things that maybe they could get away with years ago. We want lawyers to play well with each other. We heard the panel talk about I'm going to talk about credibility, but we heard the panelists talk about being nice and being nice to other people. And it's sort of sometimes we say it sounds so soft for me to say that, but the reality of it is that is a critical part of your credibility. And part of getting along with other professionals, one of the things you're going to learn, speaking to the students now, is it's a very small community, which the lawyers can acknowledge. Because, and what I mean by that is, even though you say, yeah, but this is a large community, a lot of lawyers here, or I'm moving to New York City, or I'm coming to Chicago, or LA, it's a huge community. You will see the same lawyers over and over again, and I don't care where you live. It's a very small world. It's a very round world. When I was a young associate, I remembered being sent to court. I worked with a defense firm, being sent to court to argue a motion for sanctions against a plaintiff lawyer who had done some things we thought he shouldn't have done. And I won. I won the motion. And the judge said, you win. And this guy looked at me and he said, all right, Lisnek, just remember, it's a round world. And I went, right. I didn't know what that meant, but I said, okay, and went back to the firm, and I went to the senior partner. We won. I got the motion for sanctions. We won. He said, all right, good job. I said, now what do I do? I've never done this before. What are the steps I have to take in order to collect the money from him? He said, we're not going to do that. We're not collecting the money. I said, we're not. What did I go through all that for? No. We needed to justify for the client, defense firm, we needed to justify to the client that the steps we've taken, what we've done has been proper, everything's whatever, but we're not going to collect the money from this guy. That would be silly. We've got hundreds of cases with him. It's a round world. Sure enough, within a month, I needed a favor from him, right? An extension, whatever it may be. I called him, got it, everything was fine. I'm not saying don't pursue your motions for sanction, but what I'm saying is it's a recognition of the concept of civility. It's a recognition of being the sort of the Lone Ranger out there and saying I'm going to do things my way or the highway is not going to be effective. The panel talked about managing partners of firms and the different styles that managing partners can bring to the party. And it's a reality. There are those who can be rough and tough and walk over anybody they need to accomplish what they want. And what they're going to find is that they're going to be successful sometimes almost in spite of themselves, and some not be successful. And then there's those who realize that we can't accomplish what we want for our firms and our own profession without being fair and nice to others. We'll talk about that in a little bit. In terms of client communication, this is what research, as you study the various cases that get filed against lawyers, this is what you learn is really, I'm putting in as the number 2 concern, civility being number 1, but the number 1 thing that will get you reported to the disciplinary commissions around is this, and you can see why talking about specific communication skills is going to be so very important. It is, as Clint Eastwood said, a failure to communicate. Right? That's what we have here. Cool hand, Lou. That's what we have here, which is, was that Clint Eastwood? Was that Paul Newman? That was Paul Newman. I knew that was wrong right when I said that. Thank you for that clarification. Fees and billing, chronology, and length of litigation. Those are concerns that clients have that for whatever reason, lawyers who are not in control of their game will find that they're not communicating about. The number 1 thing that gets you reported is a failure to be in communication with your clients. Why? Because the clients don't understand why you're not returning their phone calls. The clients don't understand what's up. And I will tell you that when you're not returning phone calls, generally speaking, something is up. It's not usually because I'm just so busy I don't have time. No, something's gone wrong. You've blown a statute of limitations and didn't get something filed. Something's gone wrong. And what some lawyers will do, the ones who are now getting in trouble, rather than addressing it with the client, dealing with it, even trying to fix it, they're hiding. And I can tell you, that will get you reported. Here's a bonus tip, right? A bonus ethics tip. When you find out you're reported, not that this will ever happen to any of you, but should you ever find out you're reported, one of the first things lawyers will then do is get back to the client. They call the client. I'm sorry. What's wrong? All right, look, I know wasn't in touch, but I'm back in touch now. We're in control. Let me talk to you. We'll fix this. Here, let me tell you what's going on, and I apologize for that. But just do me a favor. Would you just drop this complaint because I apologize to you? And the client, by the way, is happy to do that because the client says, you're back. You're back. I can work with you now. This is wonderful. And so, of course, I'll drop the complaint. And they call the commission, And they say, by the way, I'm not sure what you folks did, but thank you very much. My lawyer has called me, and we're back in touch. They've asked that I've drop this, and I'm in fact happy to do this. And the result of that is count 2 of the complaint. The result of that is, I'm sorry, that lawyer asked you to do what? Drop it, count 2. Right? By the way, it's not yours to drop. Client, complaining witness, you're nothing but a witness to us. And so the fact that you were asked to do this is actually a now bigger problem for the lawyer. All of this could have been avoided by lawyers who are simply in contact with their clients. One of the things I do is sometimes I moderate panels and that. And I was doing this for a law firm. Actually, it's in Chicago and in this area as well, but I won't say the firm. And, but they brought, the audience were the lawyers. Really interesting. The audience were the lawyers. The panel consisted of clients of the firm. All right? And they wanted their lawyers to hear from their clients. Basically, to have the lawyers hear why it is we're such a great firm. So the clients came in. Lawyers filled the room, and I moderated. And as we're talking, one of the litigators, I say litigator because there are litigators and trial lawyers. Trial lawyers try cases. Litigators will eventually try cases. But one of the litigators stood up, who had been a litigator for years, never having actually tried anything yet. And he stood up and he said, I've got to ask you a question. What? He goes, well, you're all talking about, you know, you like us and whatever, but I'm not hearing any of you clients tell us that the reason you are here, the reason we are your lawyers, is because we win. It would be the litigator that would say that. We win. And we win. And one of the panelists, kind of a short, he had a cigar that type, he sort of took the cigar out of his mouth and he said, you lose too. This guy was stunned. What do you think? He goes, yeah, but you don't see me leaving you when you lose. It's not why we're here. We expect that you're going to win mostly, but you're going to lose from time to time. We're here because of the relationship we have with you, because of your communication with us, because of the way you treat us, because of the way we interact with you. That's why we're here. And that was sort of stunning, to be honest. And if you're trial law is my background. We like to think of ourselves, you know, if I'm a wonderful trial lawyer, it's why I'm successful. And that's part of it. But trust me, there are great trial lawyers out there who don't have a lot of clients because the clients don't like them, because they don't give respect and have the kind of interaction that their clients expect. This comes from a book by Richard Whiteley called Customer Driven Company. It wasn't written about law firms. It was written about corporations. It doesn't matter. Put the law firm in this setting. Put your experience in this setting. Put your own, you know, experience with stores and whatever you buy things from in this setting. Here's what it says. We measure our quality success along 2 axes, if you will. One, the work product we provide, but then separated out from that is the concept of service. See, oftentimes as lawyers, what's drummed into our heads, as students, we need A's, we need A's, we need A's. The lawyers, I've got to win, I've got to win. It's part of it. It's one of the axes you see. But there's the service component, and that's critical. And it sort of started in the late 80s into the 90s and now, but the concept of service is critical. And I work with some consultants and one of the things that we do, we visit law firms and we actually train lawyers in, I'll just call them marketing skills, because that's what it is. We train lawyers in marketing skills. We call it other things because lawyers don't want to think of it that way. But that's essentially what it is. And some of the lawyers are very strong. They're forced to go. The managing partner says, no, you're going through this training. And the lawyer says, I'm a great lawyer. I don't need to worry about, but that's not what brings clients. Being a great lawyer, providing work product is part of it. But think about the 4 quadrants you have here, for example. You can have poor work product or excellent work product, anywhere along the continuum. You can have poor service or excellent service, right? So can you think of, by the way, of just an example of your life, which is something with really poor work product, but excellent service? What in your life represents that? Don't think, it's not about law, that's not what I'm thinking about. Poor work product, but excellent service. Think about the late nights when you're really hungry and you want pizza, right? You call Domino's or one of those, and let's be honest, I mean, Domino's is wonderful, but you know, it's kind of like cardboard, but it's okay because because you know in 30 minutes, that driver, no matter who or he or she had to kill on the way there, is going to get you that pizza in 30 minutes. Terrible pizza, but I'm hungry now. So there are the components, and we call that's not great work product, but great service, right? Is that what you want? Well, there may be times you need it. What about an example of something which is excellent work product, but poor service? I'll come to you. Any examples that occur to you? A product, a restaurant, whatever it is. iPod. Excellent. Now, what do you mean by poor service?
So they charge you $45 every time you call.
Oh, okay. So it's a great device. Love the iPod, but in terms of the service, I bought the thing. Would you please help me? Would you please do something? No, you're going to pay, and it's very aggravating for you, right? Some would argue airlines. Great service in terms of, look, I was in Chicago yesterday, and, only about 12 hours later, I was here. Bad service. But in terms of work product, hey, the airplane worked. We went up. Again, I'm here. It was great product. Service, another issue. Poor work product, poor service. Any examples from your life? You thinking of one?
Someone suggested that parking at Duke.
Well, would be one example. However, but it could be poor service, poor quality, and do you want to sort of give that folks? Imagine you're the lawyer who provides poor work quality, not great stuff, and poor service. You're not going to be in business way too long. And of course, what do we all strive for? What's great product and great service? Anybody have an example of that? Lexus, Rolex, Briggs & Riley bags, by the way. For those of us who travel a lot, Briggs & Riley, guaranteed for life. And I've got this one bag, and every time the wheel fell off once, or whatever, bring it in, fix for free, not a problem. Everything for life. Great product, great service. Disney, right? Great product, great service, customer service. Imagine the people, the screaming kids, everything they've got to deal with. I was just there last weekend. And so, and no matter what goes on, they're smiling at you. You know they want to kill somebody, but they smile, they're trained. They're called cast members, right? They buy this. And this is what works to sort of, I'm a cast member, I'm here to play. Anyway, as lawyers, as future lawyers, you've got to think about this. It's not just about I'm bright. It's not just about I'm smart and I do it. That's a critical part. But the service you provide to your clients, the service you provide to family members, et cetera, and within the firm is going to be critical. It's about excellent work product and excellent service as well. So that takes me into kind of the communication material I want to get into. And I start with this phrase, communication is the response that you get. But what I mean by that is not so much where I say hi and you say hi back to me. That's a very small piece of it. We're going to see in a little bit about just how much that really means. But the field that I want to introduce you to, and there's a lot of work here at Duke over the years in linguistics and language. I'm going to have a little piece of that towards the end of my session here. But the material I want to share with you comes from a field called neuro-linguistic programming, or NLP. Have any of you heard of it? You have. Matthew, what's your experience with it?
My brother buys a lot of books on it.
Oh, okay. All right. Does he have mine? Oh, all right. And you know about this, right, Jen? Yeah, because you know everything. Well, anyway, Jen's so smart. Anyway, if the rest of you are not familiar with neuro-linguistic programming or NLP, that's fine, because I get to introduce you to it, and that's fine. Let me just, before I go on with that slide, just to tell you just a couple of things about where this field comes from and what it is. Neuro-linguistic program is a much too complicated phrase for what actually is the art of building rapport with other people. And that, of course, becomes a critical tool, and that's if you think about the panel we had before, and now adding to that this communications piece, it's really critical. The material began, if you will, the study of this field began back in the 1970s. In the world of counseling and therapy, all right? So it was counselors, therapists, who first began to sort of identify this. And the way they used it, and still use it, is in recognizing how people process information and making major shifts in those people based on the processing modes. So in the world of therapy, just a couple of examples, people who are terrified of public speaking, they can get you over that in about 30 minutes. You're a smoker, you don't know how to quit, they can get you over that in a couple of hours. It all has to do with how you process and by working with the way in which you process. So counselors and therapists work with it a lot, and there are people who specialize in that. In the 1980s, this material got brought into the world of marketing and business. And that's probably what your brother reads a lot of, Matthew. Yeah. If you're in marketing and business, there's no way you're not going to be introduced to this material about how people process information, how to build rapport. It's all about clients and customers. Well, then think about the lawyer, right? Well, what do we do? So in the beginning of the 90s is when I was trained in this and learned about all of this, and I began to teach it to lawyers. And a colleague of mine, whose name was Byron McCoy, he was a professor at the University of Houston Law School. Byron passed away a few years ago. But although we were friends, we were each teaching it and didn't realize it. He was teaching it to law students in trial advocacy, and I was teaching it to lawyers in CLE. And then we worked together in a NITA program, a National Institute for Trial Advocacy program, and realized we're both teaching this stuff. And we thought, oh, how great is this, that we're bringing these skills to the lawyers? What I have to tell you is back in the early 90s, the lawyers were resistant to this. That is to say, they thought that Byron and myself and a few others were wackos in terms of dealing with this stuff. Fast forward about 15 years, because that's what it's been, a little bit longer than that. And in addition to the books I've written or Byron has written in the area, now all of a sudden, and those of you in trial advocacy, the odds are your trial ad book has a chapter or more on this material in the book. So things have come a long way in the last 15 years. And so what is this stuff? What is it you're talking about? And it's about how people process information and communications in the response. What it's really saying is that the way what I mean is, as you're sitting here and you're listening to me right now, how are you making sense out of what I'm saying? And I'm going to tell you how you're doing that. But the real important component here is you tend to believe that whatever it is you're doing, even if you're not quite sure what you're doing, whatever it is you're doing is what everybody's doing. And that's not true. But if you understand what you're doing and what other people might be doing, my mission today is to say what you want to be able to do is adapt your style to the style of others. And that's how you become the more effective communication. So communication is not about me, it's about you. And what is it we need to do to reach the various different kinds of processors? So that's the kind of material that I'm going to get into. Having said that, the field begins with a series of presuppositions. And I'm just going to share a couple of them with you, the lawyers and the CLE, and you've got a book, and there's more about this in the book. But I want to share just a couple of basic presuppositions for you that kind of set the pace of what the field is about. Meaning lies within people, and people experience their map of reality and not reality itself. What does that mean? First of all, the phrase, meaning lies within us, you can say that a couple of different ways. Meaning lies within us, and meaning lies within us. What does that mean? Just because of the way you view the world is not necessarily the way the world is. But it is for you. It's very real. The panel this morning, it's always dangerous to get into politics and areas like that. And so sometimes the panelists with great trepidation will mention Bill Clinton or George Bush or whichever way, because you never know. And I'm going to do the same thing, just to mention the names, but I have a reason for doing it in a bit. But if I talk about Bill Clinton and his presidency and what he did and didn't do, and George Bush and his presidency and what he's done and hasn't done, I'm going to come back to that for why I've just done that and just said their names. But the bottom line is, one of the things you're doing is, you have your opinions about those folks, and they're very real for you. And your reality is not very changeable. Your core beliefs, your values, not very changeable. My mission is not to change them. My mission as a communicator is to understand what your values are if you're on my jury, or you are my client, or you're a lawyer in my firm that I'm working with, or I'm the managing partner and I've got to deal with all of you. I want to know what's going on with you, respect what's going on with you, and then be able to communicate in your world. That's what I accept as my challenge to do, not expect you to come to me. All right? We start by recognizing that the way you do view your world is very real for you. I can't look at you and say, how can you view that? That you're nuts. You're just wrong. No, you're wrong. No, you're wrong. You know where that goes, right? Do any of you get into political discussions with friends? People maybe on the opposite end of the spectrum of you? And I'm sure it's very peaceful, isn't it? Right? He should die. No, he should die. No, you should die. You know, where's that going? Right? So we start, and what is all of that about? It's about filters. Filters frame our reality. You all I put up there some of the hot button issues. You all wear filters on these topics and everything else, right? But some of you out here are pro-choice, and some are pro-life, and some of you are for capital punishment, and some of you against it. It doesn't matter. I don't care what your views are. But what I'm saying is your views of the world, these components and others, are the filters through which everything comes. It's the filters through which you judge everything. That doesn't make you right. It doesn't make you wrong. It's just the way it is for you. I need to understand what those filters are. One great way to train yourself, I don't have a lot of time today, so I won't do this, but if you read the newspaper, you all read newspapers, I guess, except I guess the younger you get, you go on the internet now, but anyway, go to the letters to the editor section. That's what I love to do every morning. I go to the letters to the editor section and I read them. Because think about it. What does it take for somebody to write a letter to the editor? I mean, a lot of things go on in the world, and I get angry at that or whatever, but I don't say, I think I shall write the newspaper about it. Because I think everybody needs to understand my view of the world, right? So imagine what it takes for somebody to sit down and go, no, they do need to understand my view of the world. I am going to write that letter. I'm so angry, and that's usually, people don't usually write because I'm so happy, right? Although it might be that. But generally it's a letter that somebody writes, and even if it is a happy letter, I'm so glad the newspaper finally addressed this topic and we need more, it's always a reflection of their filters. Right? It's always my view of the world, and it has to come out and you need to read it. So one of the things I like to do is read letters to the editor, not for the position somebody's taking, but to see if I can just determine what their filters are. And you usually can. You can usually see through. And so you see somebody, for example, who is very critical of the current administration or whatever, and you take a look, and it wouldn't surprise you to see that they come from certain aspects, liberal arts, academia, or something like that. I'm not judging anything. I'm saying you'll see certain backgrounds and say, I would see where filters would come from. Or somebody who's very supportive of the military, and you see they are a retired colonel. Right? It shouldn't surprise you when you see a position and say, I see the background that they bring to this. It's our filters. Everything comes through it. It is real for us. When we communicate with others, we communicate at two levels. We all do, right? And what's nice about this material is we're not talking about clients, we're talking about you and clients and judges and everybody, and your professors. We're talking about you. This is what humans do. We communicate at two levels. One level of communication is the level of behavior or action. It's what I have up there as kind of the lower level of communication, but we communicate at the level of behavior. We'll file the case, we'll win the case, stuff that we do. I'll offer you $10,000 to settle the case. That's all behavioral stuff. But what is beyond it, what is behind it, if you will, what is underneath it, pick your perspective, is information at the level of values or needs. We communicate at the level of behavior, we communicate at the level of values. Brittany, when you get phone calls from folks, how quickly do you get, and there's no right answers, fear not, I know you're just about to drink that coffee. How quickly do you call people back when they call you?
I try to be quick, but sometimes I can get behind, with email usually I try to respond right away, because otherwise
so you're the law student. Well, it's not that it depends on the. If you were to put a time component to it, it's an hour, it's a day, it's a week, and there's no wrong answers. Don't worry about it. Mm-hmm. How quickly do you get back to people?
Probably depends on the person, I guess.
Well, let's assume you like them. I don't know, or you don't like them. I don't know.
I would call back, but in the next 10 minutes, probably.
Really? So you call people back immediately, instantly, within 10 minutes. Now, Bill, you're one of our seasoned lawyers, so if I can ask your perspective, you've had years of clients calling you. How quickly do you get back to clients?
Same day.
By the end of the day, all right, or same day. Julia, you were nice enough to introduce me. I'll ask you, how quickly do you call back to people? I'm not walking around the room with this. I'm just coming to 3 people.
Usually next few days.
Within a few days. Okay. So we've got, as soon as I can get to a phone, we've got by the end of the day, and we've got within a few days. So, Brittany, I've got one more question. What's important to you about getting back to people so quickly?
Because I appreciate that when people get back to me. I get frustrated when I don't hear from people.
All right. So it's about avoiding frustration for you. The thought is, if I treat you that way, you'll treat me that way. And what's important about not having that frustration or being treated that way? What does that do for you?
When people get back to me, you mean?
Yeah, what's important about that for you? That
Because
immediacy.
it makes me feel important.
It's about feeling important, all right? Bill, in terms of getting back to people, by your clients, by the end of the day, what does that do for you? What's important about that?
Satisfying the client.
Client satisfaction. What's important about satisfied clients?
People.
All right, is it about survival, would you say? It's about paying their bills and all that? Bill ultimately says survival. Julia, what's important about getting back to your folks within a couple of days? What does that do for you?
Honestly, my frame is more kind of the spectrum of people in other states and, friends and family long distance, and it's a little more relaxed because it is a long distance relationship, and I feel like by calling them back immediately, they're not going to do that for me, and so it's almost, too aggressive for those relationships, but you do want to, address any immediate concern that may have come up. So.
Okay. She'd be a good lawyer, isn't she? Love that little. So what's important about getting back to people within a couple of days is the appearance of not appearing too aggressive?
Yeah, definitely. You don't want them to think like
That you care that much about them. That you really are concerned.
it's awful. It's sort of bad.
No judging.
Yeah.
So, but it's okay. But it's about image. It's about the proper image. Let's just put it that way. So you're trying to create a certain impression in terms of that. Okay, now there are no right answers or wrong answers. And by the way, you'll be happy to know the ABA did a survey on this topic a few years ago, and they asked lawyers, what's the longest amount of time it is appropriate to wait to get back to clients, or can you wait to get back to clients? What do you think the longest amount of time the ABA survey said one could wait? Paul, you're just into this stuff, so I got to ask you. What do you think the ABA survey said?
The survey said a couple days.
3 weeks. 3 weeks. So, according to the ABA survey, the lawyers said within 3 weeks, which is just incredible. Have you called the client back? Well, no, it's still January. I don't think there's a. Anyway, that'll be problematic, but that's so says the survey. Well, here's the thing. What I was demonstrating in that little interaction was this model. By asking you how quickly you get back to people, I didn't really care what your answer was, and that's why I gave you the 3-week comment. All of you were ahead of the 3-week point. But when you heard 10 minutes, end of the day, within a couple of days, what did you all start to do? The rest of you started to probably judge that answer. That's too long. That's too short. Oh, she's not, so he's great. No, I can't do that. No, that's about right. No, that works for me. You all started to judge the validity of those answers for you. And what I want this model to help you do, not my model, an LP model, therapist model, but what I want this to help you do is to recognize we don't want to do that. It's not about judging that answer. It's about understanding the importance of that behavior in somebody else. Many times lawyers have clients that I don't understand my client. I don't understand why they're this way and what's going on. And that's because we're imposing meaning on the client's position. The questions I asked you, what's important for you, Brittany, about getting back to people so quickly, are questions of art. They're here. And the only thing you'll see in the next slide, which is the one thing you can't do, if you're not comfortable asking the question, what about that's important for you, what will that do for you, you can modify the question so it's comfortable. The only thing you really can't do is turn it into a why question, right? You don't want to, and the reason for that is when I say to you, why do you wait 10 minutes to get back to somebody? The word why triggers the brain in a different way. You might even sense it by my wording it that way. Why leads people to, number one, get defensive. Why do you wait a couple of days? And all of a sudden Julia's, oh no, oh no. It creates defensiveness. And secondly, why also can lead to hallucination. And by that I mean, why do you wait 2 days? As Julie goes, and off she goes to create an answer. And I'm not interested in that. I want to know what's going on. So the what question to the client, to the partner, the what question, what's important about this, is really critical because what it does is it acknowledges the position without questioning it, without judging it, and says, give me more information. Now, we would spend a little more time. I was being a little quick about it when I said to you, but when I said what's important about doing that, we're hearing about, and the kind of things you get at that upper level of value, it is. Bill ultimately says, getting back to people, I want them to like me, whatever, it's survival. It's survival. Without clients, I don't survive as a lawyer. The kind of things you hear at that upper level, survival, professionalism, responsibility, loyalty, those are the kind of things that drive us and other things, right? Reputation, image, it's up there. Sometimes you don't get that answer instantly, and so one of Brittany's first things is, well, I want people to call me back too. That's still behavioral, so I've got to ask you again, and that's the way to do it. Well, what's important about that? I may ask the question 3 or 4 or 5 times until ultimately we find out what's driving you. Why am I doing that? Well, I don't know why, but what's important about doing that is I want to find out what's driving you because I'm not here to judge it. I want to understand what makes you tick. And if I can understand what makes you tick, I can better work with you as a client. I work as a mediator as well. And I had a case that was assigned to me, court-appointed mediation, and it was a case that had been going on 4 or 5 years. It involved a wrongful death, young girl who was killed in a car accident by an elderly driver. The defense offered, there was a $25,000 policy. That's all there was in this case. And the defense offered the $25,000 on day one. I mean, it was just, here you go. And the plaintiff's family, the survivor, said no. This went on for 5 years. And ultimately, they came to mediation, and the lawyers came in. I said, what's going on? And they said, you know, crazy family. The defense lawyer said, look, we have $25,000. I offered it to them on day one. They won't take it. They haven't taken it. I have nothing else. My client, the insured, is an elderly guy. He's got his home, very modest home. There's nothing. There's nothing there. Plaintiff's lawyer, what's going on? I've got unreasonable clients. I don't know what to tell you because everything the defense lawyer said is right. She's offered the money. My clients won't take it. I don't get them. They're very difficult to work with. I said, can I speak to your clients? Sure. Can I do it outside of your presence? With their permission, I did. And the ultimate, this story goes on for hours, but the end of the story was, you know what the clients wanted? They looked and they said, all these lawyers want to do is pay us off. They want us to take this money and go away. There has been no recognition of our loss. Nobody seems to care. The lawyer wants his third. She wants to close the file. And we've lost our daughter. We want to know that this guy is never going to drive again. We want somebody to tell us they're sorry that this happened. That's what we want. We don't care about the money. $25,000? It might be a lot for some of us as we sit in the room, but understand the family. That's not bringing our daughter back. It's nothing. And we brought the lawyers in outside the family again, and I told them this. They still didn't get it because the plaintiff's lawyer's reaction when I said they wanted an apology, we can get that. We can do that. They said, dude, you're just not sinking in here, right? This is not a check it off, let's do this, let's do that. Your clients want to see that somebody cares here. I can do that. I can care. And ultimately, the clients came back in and the case did settle. And the client said, we want to make a statement. And they said, we're going to settle this case. And it was very interesting because they said, not because of, they did this in front of the lawyers. They said, we're settling this case and not because of these lawyers sitting here. And this was not a pat on the back for me, but they looked and they said, you, Mr. Mediator, are the first person to ever listen to us. we've got to tell our story. You listened. We really believe you cared. We'll settle this case now. And the lawyers just sort of shook their head. And I talked to them even a little bit more afterwards to just say, I mean, you got to get this, folks. You've got to care about your clients. It's not just about the payday and the paycheck and all of that. Because sometimes you will lose for your clients. And guess what? They will come back when they appreciate the relationship. Well, anyway, those are the two levels of communication. Most people communicate at the lower level. The message of this model is don't judge it, don't put values on it, don't interpret it with your own values, but find out from the client what's driving them. The flip side to this model, by the way, the way you come back down, because you see, if I were to, and I won't, I might just come to you with this one, because one of the ways in which you ensure your success and survival as a lawyer is by getting back to your clients quickly. That's one of the things you do, certainly by the end of the day. How else do you ensure your success, or have you ensured your success as a lawyer? One of the things you do is you get back to your clients by the end of the day. What else have you done? How else do you do that? Do you do success?
Work on that problem.
Sorry?
Work on that problem.
All right, so it's about hard work, resolving their issues. And I could stay with Bill, and he could just continue to give me answers. We can talk about image and impression, and I can say, in addition to calling people back in a timely manner, in a timed manner, what else do you do to monitor? And I guarantee you'll have answers. The bottom line is, the values that are in you that you're using to respond to these questions, those are values that you use in any situation. They're part of your life's values. So the truth is, for those of you who are very concerned about relationship and all of that, you're concerned about that in your profession and in your personal life and your family life and everything else. The values you have that function, think about what it is, and this will be a slide at the end of the program, but you all either are lawyers or are going to be lawyers. What's propelling you in that, right? Some of you are saying it's about money. Some of you are saying it's about justice, or as one of our panelists said, or just us, right? But we're motivated by different things. This model is something to be used to say, I'm not here to judge the client or do that. I'm here to gather information. I'm here to find out what motivates them, and I'm here to take whatever motivates them and work with it in a way that best suits their needs. That case of $25,000 in wrongful death would have been settled long ago if the lawyers had just been reflective of their client's needs. Okay. I'm pressing, but nothing's happening. There we go. And there's the other question again. Avoid the why question. That's really important. Language is just so critical. I'll just give you one other language tip I wasn't going to do, but you notice when somebody says something to you and you're ready to disagree with them, what's the first thing you do? You say, but, right? Or even if we compliment somebody, Matthew, that's a nice sweater, but. When the word but follows whatever it is you've just negated whatever it is you've said, right? Trying to give Matthew a compliment. Matthew, that's a nice sweater. But it doesn't match the pants. I mean, what's the point? Don't worry, I haven't seen the pants. I have no idea. I'm sure it's lovely and it's fine. But my suggestion linguistically is try and avoid the word but when you can. That's something I really try and do in my life. I mean, sometimes you have to use the word but. It's just the appropriate word. But try and replace the word but with the word and. Just try it. Think about it. Matthew, that's a nice sweater. And a nicer pair of pants might work nicely with it. But in other words, he gets to keep the compliment as we go on and then make the other point we want to make. And so many times we're friends, we want to respond by saying, yeah, that's okay, but. And as soon as you say but, they're ready to fight you back because they now know you're about to negate what they've said, even though you pretend like you haven't. And sometimes you'll say, well, I haven't done anything to negate the point you just, yeah. And even if they can't put their finger on it, what you've done is you've just used the word but. So consider that. Somebody says something to you, you disagree and say, I understand. And let me explain why you're just so off base. And you just go on. Sometimes you'll sort of almost hit them and go, wait a minute, you're disagreeing with me? I didn't think that's where this was going. Why not? Because you said and. And acknowledges what I've said. I am acknowledging it. And now I'm about to tell you why you're wrong. Right? Very powerful. Okay. So language is really critical. And I said Mackelbar and some of the folks at Duke here have done a lot of research on that topic. I'm pointing. I'll hit that button. Is this me? John, you're right. Can you hit? Are you near a button? Oh, no, you're too far back. There must be a sensor here somewhere. Maybe this needs new batteries. Oh. Deb's back. It won't move forward. Ah, thank you. There we go. Oh, I see. You're watching this elsewhere and you know when I'm in trouble. Oh, okay. And yet you're leaving again. Amazing. Okay. I'm about to change it again real quickly. Anyway, all right, so filters frame our reality. The next of just two other points I want to give you. People make the best choices available to them at the time. Think about this. This is, again, these presuppositions of this field, how people function. We make the best choices available to us at the time. What does that mean? Let me talk about choice. When you are faced with a problem, you will search out options. When you can see only one option, you are in a robotic state. When you seek only one option, you are in a robotic state. Two options. This is the interesting one, because a lot of people think, well, what do you want, A or B? It's sort of your wonderful choice. That's not choice. A or B is a dilemma. It's either this or that. I think now about, again, it's not my role to be political, but think about the war in Iraq and options being made and all that kind of thing and what's being presented. Just I'll let you sort of deal with all of that in your head. But that's the point. The options being considered, the options being taken, all that. Two options, dilemma. And back in the last election, that's sort of the way it was presented, right? You were either for the war or you were for the terrorists. It was one or the other kind of a thing, was the argument. Well, from an academic viewpoint, forget about which side you're on, it doesn't matter. From an academic viewpoint, what you need to be able to do is say, wait a minute, that's a dilemma. In other words, I'm either for you or I'm for them, but isn't there something else? Is there another possibility here? Well, not if I'm running for office, no. But the reality of it is, as lawyers and leaders, yeah, you want true choice, you need at least three options. You need at least three options. And that's what we can do to create the true sense of choice. Now, in the world of lawyers, politics is an easy one, but in the world of lawyers, what does that mean? A jury goes back and they have to come back, right, guilty or not guilty, liable or not responsible, right? Those are dilemmas. In the part of my life is I work as a jury consultant and all that kind of thing. And in the LAPD Rodney King case, you may remember in the federal case, we, of course, there was the earlier case, there were race riots in LA, it was a mess, right? And the federal case comes up and the jury goes back, and essentially the defense lawyers say, okay, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, make sure you come back and let these folks go, right? Don't convict anybody. And the prosecutors looked and said, no, these are bad cops and you need to put them away. The jurors went back in the deliberation room in a state of dilemma, right? We convict the cops and we've got blue flu. We let them go. We've got race riots. That's a dilemma. That's where the lawyers put them. The jurors, on their own, crafted the third option. Does anybody remember what the option was, what they did, what the verdict was? Most people don't. The reason is because nothing happened. There was peace after that, right? The verdict was they convicted two and let two go. Now, splitting the difference and all that, which is what that sounds like, is not the only option, or that's always the answer, we'll split the difference. But in that case, the jurors looked and said, you know what, two of these four cops are really bad news. The other two, kind of patsies in all of this. So it seemed to be that the right answer was, put these two bad ones away, and these other two mopes, let them go. And there was peace. The jurors, we know, all high-fived each other after that, because while the lawyers sent them back in a state of dilemma, they themselves crafted choice. Now, am I suggesting that lawyers should send jurors back in a state of choice? And I'm not, because the trial lawyers among you who are here are saying, wait a minute, are you trying to tell me that I should say to the jury, okay, please don't find, I'm a defense lawyer, so please, don't hold my clients responsible, but if you do, make sure it's not a lot of money? Well, isn't that one of the great challenges the trial lawyer has? That's what, and those of the students who become defense lawyers, that's your issue. I want to argue to the jury, do not hold my client responsible. We're not responsible. But what if they do? What if they find my clients responsible? If I haven't addressed it and they reject that, I'm dealing with a huge verdict. I work in the priest abuse cases that go on, and I did some of the early ones in Dallas. I'm sure you know some of the lawyers in Bob. We'll talk. What's that? That's it. Yeah. And you know Randy Mathis? Yeah, I love him. He's great. What's that? Oh, okay. Let's talk. Oh, anyway. But it's sort of fascinating on that because as you sort of look and try and present the case, one of the things you learn in that community, Southern Baptist, very, very religious, is that if you're the church, the diocese, you're representing the priest, the church, whatever, you don't have a chance, right? And the jurors, in fact, will even tell you afterwards, by the way, Randy, the lawyer, we love you, you're great, you're wonderful, you don't have a chance, right? Because of the filters we wear. That is a really incredibly powerful thing that we've got to deal with. So my point is, if you're standing there and you're not recognizing this position, what you're saying is just don't hold me responsible, you run the risk of having a jury say, no, we do, and guess what? $110 million. So let's talk about how responsible we're going to hold you. These are the great challenges. And my answer, my position is not to tell you here's what you need to do. I simply want to raise the question for you. It is a strategic choice of the lawyers to either say I'm going to create this dilemma or not. I'm going to provide this sense of choice and options for the jury and let them sort of end. But if you're going to find against my client, then we recommend, let me talk about the damages and why they should be very, very small. The option of the lawyer. What's important for you to recommend from this piece as a communications piece is that when you're presented with two options, that is a dilemma. I know many of you, when you graduated college, some of your parents gave you that great choice. You can either have a new car to go to law school, or we'll send you to Europe. Pick one. Wasn't that a tough choice, right? I didn't have that choice personally. I was always jealous of the rich kids that had that choice. And of course, the rich kids who weren't very smart said, well, can you buy me a car and I'll drive to Europe? That way. Anyway, and the last piece I'll give you here, there's no such thing as failure, only feedback. Think about that. When I think about, again, the panel up here and talking about when things go wrong or difficult people to work with and all of that, I really love that philosophy as sort of a communication piece. Because what it says is, and I know some of you see that and you're going, oh, no, there is failure. Trust me, I can give you some examples. But what this piece is saying is when you are interacting with somebody and something goes wrong, rather than screaming and yelling and making some assumptions and imposing your values and judgments on what's happened, it's take a moment and gather some information. And so I'm aware of a legal secretary who was told by the lawyer, here, file this the way you just filed the last one. Now, she took that, and the last thing she had filed, she put it in a certain place. She put it in her drawer. So he meant file it with the court like the last of these kinds of documents that you filed. She thought he meant file it like the last thing you've just filed, right in the desk over here. Well, that presented some problems down the line when the document didn't get filed. And of course, he fired her. But aside from that, no, I'm kidding. But you know, part of that interaction he had, rather than sort of saying, you know, you're a jerk and how you did, he talked to me. How did this happen? And she said to him, well, here's what you told me. Here's what it meant to me. Now, think about taking the responsibility that that effectiveness communication is my responsibility. Think about accepting that. It's my responsibility. Here's a lawyer who now said, you know what, I now know when I interact with you, because you're a pretty competent person, that if I say something that is ambiguous, or at least not to me, but it could be to you, I want to be. So then he went on, what can we do? How do I ensure that this kind of error doesn't happen again? The concept of there's no such thing as failure, only feedback is a way of saying, rather than judging, imposing, and acting, take some time to basically gather information. Talk to me. How did this happen? Give me that kind of information. Okay. Therefore, having said all of those kind of presuppositions, I just revisit the civility concept one other time as, again, a critical ethical issue that faces our profession, although we try, as I say, and have sanctions to try and control it a little bit. But the bottom line is, this is, to me, what incivility is all about. Not really my definition, pull it from the literature. A lawyer's insecurity, lack of preparation or knowledge, producing unnecessary behavior, action, or tone. Think about that. The lawyers you know who are screaming and yelling in the courtroom or are real jerks to deal with on the phone, and you're basically just saying, right, but some of them, that's my style. Ultimately, where incivility comes in, where somebody's not easy to work with, this is generally what's triggering it. You're being nasty to me because I'm not so sure you have control over this case. I'm not really sure you have a full understanding of what the issues are here. Why else do you need to scream and rant and rave? If you were in control, if you had a full understanding of what's going on, you wouldn't need to do this. Do I get cases of lawyers reported to the commission who have violated this? Absolutely, and all the time. But what's interesting is, you know what the defense usually is when they're called in, they've been screaming and yelling at a judge in the court, judge says, that's it, I'm turning you in. Their answer is, it was my strategy. Screaming and yelling at the judge in front of the jury. Let's talk about strategy here, right? Not a good one. And oftentimes, but by the way, as a disciplinary commissioner, my job is not just, okay, you lose your license, we'll take yours away, that's nice, you don't do this for a couple of months, that's part of it. But you know what I really have more, better results with? It's the rule that allows me to have somebody get help. It's the rule that says, you know what? You're going to anger management. You put a lot of time, effort, and money into becoming a lawyer. You're having some issues here. Go to anger management. You need to do this. I had a lawyer who appeared before me. He was 80 years old. Never been in trouble before in his career. He was the small town lawyer. I'm in North Carolina, so it was kind of a Mayberry kind of town that he was a lawyer in, only in Illinois. And he was the town lawyer. And he had one crazy client who would come to him all the time and changed his will every week or so. And he would come in, he'd write the will, and the next week the guy would come back and say, that's it, I hate her now, I'm leaving it all to so-and-so. And every week he'd come in and say, that's it, they're no good, and he would change it. And one week he came in and said, you know what, the hell with everybody, you're the only person who's nice and fair to me, I'm leaving it to you. You're the best lawyer I've ever, it's you. So the lawyer, all right, here we go, because you know the guy's coming back next week, and I'm going to change it again, except it's like the ultimate and perfect bar exam question, and it doesn't sound real, but it was. What happened? The guy died. The guy died within a couple of weeks before he came back to change the will again. What happens to the 80-year-old lawyer who'd never been in trouble? He's now in trouble because he wrote the will that left him, remember that rule? Don't write wills that leave you stuff in them as a general rule for clients, right? Have somebody else write it, all sorts of ways to do it. There's not a program in that today, but that was the point. Well, anyway, he came in, and there he was at 80 years old, crying. It was sad. I yanked that license away from him. No, I said, it was a very sad moment because you know what? Compared to that kind of experience, I was sitting there as a kid. You know, we were all kids next to this lawyer. And essentially, the answer for him was, because he said, look, I don't want, by the way, the stuff that the guy left him, it wasn't that much. He didn't have anything. He said, I don't even want the stuff. It's just take it. That wasn't the point. The resolution, because that would have been he could have been suspended, all sorts of things. The resolution was, would you take a class in wills? Would you go back to school and just own up on your ability to write wills and trust in those kind of things? He said, absolutely, I would do that, and that was the resolution. I mean, sometimes working with somebody to sort of recognize you're qualified, you're capable, no such thing as failure, only feedback, and working with it in a civil way. All right, let's get into the sort of really communication tools that I think you're going to find fun. I did. When I first came across this material, it was just great fun, and you'll be able to play with it. These are all the different kinds of components and perspective in which one I'm going to talk about will play a role. Some of you are public speakers, you will be teachers, you will be lawyers, or you are lawyers, you do panels, all these sort of things. You'll be, I don't care if you're asked to give a toast at a wedding, whatever it may be, you have moments where you are interacting with other people. You have significant others in your life, all sorts of roles that important communication is so important. Communication is so important to us. And I start with this credibility piece. The panel actually references from time to time, I was going to say, oh yes, I'm going to do that stuff. Because the panel was sort of talking about the pieces of credibility. For example, the likable piece came up. Be nice to other people, and sure enough, it's not only seemingly a soft piece, the reality of it is, it's a formal part of the definition of credibility. This is a research-based slide. What's interesting for me about this is that the first part is the way a lot of people usually view credibility. It's all about competence. I go to Duke Law School. I'm a Duke grad. Please, I mean, I'm talking about competence. That is only half the game. Your reputation, your experience, your successes and all of that, your resume, if you will, is half of your credibility. Does it open doors? Absolutely. Does it create sort of that instant component of credibility for people? Of course it does. But that's half the game. The subjective part of that competence component, by the way, is your interaction with people. It's the notion of after you interact with a while and somebody looks at you and goes, I'm sorry, you graduated from Duke? Uh-oh. Not working well, I guess. Yeah, right, exactly, right? Because it's not just that objective resume component, but it's how you come off. It's how you interact with people. Are you the person that resume says you are, right? That colleague, Byron McCoy from Houston, he had a great line that he used to share with me. He said, you know, Paul, there's lawyers who have 30 years of experience, and there are lawyers who have one experience for 30 years. And that's a very different kind of lawyer. You want to sort of recognize that the professions change, things change. You know, for most of you who are students and are coming into the profession, you know, you're going to be dealing with clients and jurors who are sort of pseudo-lawyers. It's a very scary concept, actually. I mean, when I started in the profession about 25 years ago, I mean, there was no court TV. We didn't have CSI and Law and Order and all these kinds of things. In fact, Law and Order wasn't even around until I was a dean. So, I mean, we had Perry Mason, and that was just, you know, that was the real killer in the back of the courtroom, identified before the show was over. But mostly, my point is that these days, people come to law school, and they watch court TV. They're pseudo-lawyers. I do a lot of court TV commentary, and I remember I was on talking about a case that involved insanity defense and all that, and I had said something, and I said something like, you know, that would be crazy or whatever, not referring in a legal way. I was just talking about something being crazy. And Nancy Grace, she said, now, Paul, that's a great comment, but court TV viewers know that the legal standard, and she went on to sort of, and I went, okay, this is scary. This is just scary because we have a lot of people, and they show up on the juries just saying, oh yeah, I know how this works. I know the standard. I get it. I watch this stuff. I lecture around the country for people who are thinking of becoming lawyers. It's sort of this pre-law program. I put them through a sample law class and torture them. But here was the thing. I used this New York case to do it. And I always call on somebody and say, now, what court is this from? Oh, it's the appeals court of New York. Ah, now, of course, it's a setup question for me because I want to say, well, now, that means if the loser of this case isn't happy, they would go to the highest court in New York, which would be the Supreme Court then, waiting for them to bite. But this student said, no, actually, the Court of Appeals is the highest court in New York. Supreme Court is actually the trial court in New York. Now, wanting to play law professor, I wouldn't give in. Really? How do you know? Because they were right. And she said, oh, I saw it on Law & Order. They dealt with that. It's amazing, the sort of pseudo-lawyers coming out there. So once again, it's a different profession. Things are different. Competence, objective, subjective. But look at the other part, the other 50%. Character and trust. One of the panelists again this morning talked about that piece. The first thing, I think it was Candace, first thing said was the most important thing, people need to trust you. They need to be able to trust you at your word. I owe you documents on Friday and I'm not going to have them. You better believe you're going to get a phone call from me on Wednesday saying, hi, I don't have those documents yet. I need another 21 days. And you know the reaction's always the same. Number one, oh, are those due Friday? Nobody's even thinking about it. And number two, sure. Yeah, no worries. I mean, I can't believe you've called. I can't believe you're ahead of the game. Most lawyers, sanctions aside, have to be chased where those documents, you owe them to me, come on, I'll bring you up for all this that's the incivility stuff that doesn't make any sense. We shouldn't have to do that. Part of our credibility is being true to your word. I've got a friend who, if I have a dinner party and I say come over at 7, the bell rings at 7 o'clock. Not at 7:01 and not at 6:59, 7 o'clock. Sometimes I look out and I'll see her pacing on the sidewalk, waiting for 7 o'clock, right? Now here's the thing, when you invite somebody to your house at 7 o'clock, you don't actually want them there at 7 o'clock, right? You're not even dressed. I mean, 7 means, 7:15. Yeah. I've had to learn with her to say, by the way, what time's the party? 7:12. It's at 7:12. And 7:12, there she is, right? Absolutely. And I've kidded her, and she was a law school, not a dean, but a law school registrar, and she just said, look, it's important. My word is important to me. You know, you've told me, you've said, I've agreed to it. I've got to be there. If I don't do that, I mean, if I don't have my word, what do I have? And I know what's really wonderful is talk about trusting somebody and knowing when they give you your word, you can rely on it as long as the day is long, and you can, which is really wonderful. Composure, being in control. Now, for those of you, of course, a lot of you are law students, so I want to give you a quick technique to kind of assist you because it can be very unnerving when you are first entering the practice and and here you are dealing with lawyers who have 30 years of experience on the other side of the table. Because, we don't assign you into teams. We don't say, oh, you're a new lawyer? All right, let's pick a new lawyer from the other side. We'll have that. It doesn't work that way, right? So you might be out there as a new lawyer working with somebody like Bill here has been doing this a long time, and hey, that's just the way it goes. And that can be very intimidating to have a case, a matter, a deal with somebody who's been doing this a very long time. So what's important is the concept of composure. You want to look composed as opposed to looking decomposed. And so part of the notion is, think about what it means to be composed. And you know what that means. It's about eye contact. It's about presence. It's about all of that. But here's the technique. I'll give you a quick story and then I'll give you the technique. I had a student years ago who was in his 50s. He came to law school very late in life. Not very, but late in life. And he came to me before he graduated and he said, I got to be honest with you. He goes, I'm 51 years old. He said, I'm now first going to enter a courtroom. He said, how can I even stand up against these kids, as he called you? These kids who are next to me, they're 25 and 27, and I'm not going to be able to, I can't. And I went, Pete, you look like you've been doing this for 25 years. Nobody knows you're new, right? You need to, and here's the technique, acting as if. You need to act as if you've been practicing law for a long time. By the way, let me just ask you, what does that mean? What does acting as if I'm a seasoned lawyer mean to you? And the answer, and I'm just going to invite you to respond, it's a behavioral question. What does it mean? What is a lawyer who looks like you've been doing this a long time, what does that mean? What behaviors do they exhibit? Suggestions? Should I come to our seasoned lawyers to ask? Okay, so Matthew says competence, but how does that show itself? What are you reacting to that says you're competent?
That they're always on time, as you said, that they keep their word.
So there's a promptness, there's a keeping to their word. What else? You meet them in court. How do you know that they are a seasoned lawyer, whether they are or not?
They look confident as well.
All right, so confident. There's a confidence about them, which again, I would still say need behavior. What is confidence looking?
Calmness about you, and
So there's calmness. You don't see nervous, no rustling through the papers, all right? And I won't carry on this discussion, but the point is you've got to identify the behaviors that are those behaviors of somebody who looks comfortable and looks confident. I started teaching in 1979, and I remember when I went into class, I said, at U of I, at the University of Illinois, I said, you know what, I'm not going to tell the students that I'm just starting out teaching. I'd rather look as if I've been doing this for a while. I was young, but I want to look as if I've been doing this for a while. I shared an office with this guy who said, actually, he was from California. He said, actually, dude, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to let my students know that I've never taught before and they've never learned before, and we'll kind of go through this together. Well, it was late 70s, so I went in, cup of coffee, wore a pair of jeans, sat on the desk, and began teaching and doing my thing. At midterm time, we shared an office. My students got their grades and went home. His students were lined up outside our office, everyone yelling at him. You gave me a C. You admit you've never taught before. You don't know what a C student is. I've been a student my whole life, and I know what a C student is, and I'm not a C student. And they turned him into one of the meanest professors you've ever seen in your life. He was this really nice guy, and now it's like, don't take a class from that guy. Well, it's because the students turned him into it. But I say he allowed it to happen because he did not act as if he was competent, in control. He exhibited the behaviors of somebody who could be walked on. And by the way, grades are pretty important. Oh, maybe not to law students, but grades. Grades are absolutely critical to our future and success. So you want to know when the professor gives you a C, and if that's the way it goes, that, you know what? Then that's the way it is. There's competence behind that grade. So that 50-year-old student, I saw him in court about 6 months after he'd been admitted, and he stopped me in the hallway. He says, I got to tell you what happened. He says, I went into court. Oh, in Chicago, the judges have kind of a tradition. When you're first admitted to practice and the first time you're before them, they will often look at you and say, counsel, is this your first time before me in court? Why, yes, it is, Judge. You've done a fine job. Have a great career. Congratulations. That's a nice little thing that they do. So Pete said, there he was in front of a judge, and afterwards, it was his first time. The judge looked down, not at him, but at his opponent, and said, counsel, it's your first time appearing before me? And the guy looked and said, Judge, I've been before you for 7 years now. Oh, well, all right, fine, get out. And Pete said, it never even dawned on him to look at me. Right? There was no way it was my first time, but of course it was. So acting as if is a very powerful technique to acting as if I am composed, whether or not you are. And finally, being likable. Again, you will accomplish far more when your colleagues like you, when your clients like you, when people like you. And being nice, it sounds simple, it's soft, it really isn't. It's just true. Clients will forgive loss, mistake, and error when they like you. All right, power of non-words as I get into sort of this how we process information piece. The bottom line is that because we are lawyers or law students, words are very important to us. So we think a lot about words, and yet the research tells us, this research goes back to the 1920s. Words are a very small piece of the puzzle. 7% is the power of words. Now, I'm not saying words aren't important. Put the wrong words in a document, you've got malpractice issues. I don't mean that. But what I am saying is that in terms of the impact and our meaning, the words are a very small piece of that puzzle. Paralanguage, 38%. Round it up. Call it 40%. Paralanguage, the use of voice, how you say things, pitch, rate, tone, volume. 40% of your impact. And body language, how you address, how you carry yourself, how you appear, over half the message. So you're a law student looking for a job, you send a resume on law review, top student, everything else, editor-in-chief, and you show up for your interview in jeans, a torn shirt, and green spiked hair. You're going to have that law firm going, I don't know. And yet, what are they reacting to? You might be the brightest person in the world. You're exactly who they want. But we don't want clients to see this image. Over half the message is that. Of course, if we do appeals, we might hire you. No one's going to see it. But anyway, 90% or so of our message is beyond the words. So you say to me, how you feeling? Fine. Well, the word says fine, but obviously the way I say it is not. And by the way, women are better than men at hearing the mismatch between words and how they're said. It's just the way it has to do with brain size. And what it is, yeah, it does. The connector between the right and the left hemisphere in a female brain is 10 times larger than it is in a male brain. So it's just what gives women the ability to better read beyond words. And I look around the room and I sort of see that a lot of the women are looking back at me, they're doing this. Huh? And the guys are looking back like this, which just confirms the research. And by the way, think of your personal relationships, by the way, right? I mean, for the guys, if you're always like in trouble at home and it's like, what did I do? Exactly. Right. You come home and Matthew, I'm home. And the response is, uh-huh. He says, oh, want to go out for dinner? No. Oh, okay. So I guess we'll just stay home? Yeah. See, now Matthew's not only in trouble for whatever it was he was in trouble for before he got home, it's now escalating because he's also not catching on to the fact that he's not aware that he's in trouble, and now he's got bigger problems than he ever had before. But it's not your fault, it's brain size. And so what the guys need to simply say from now on is simply say, hey, I'm sorry, not my fault, brain size, 10 times smaller, whatever, and that will generally work. At least your partner or spouse will often acknowledge and say, well, you got that right, and hopefully move on. But by the way, on the flip side of that, for the women, the suggestion to you is when you're interacting with guys is you need to be a little more concrete than you otherwise might want to. In other words, don't assume we're just going to get it because brain size suggests that we need that help. And I put it there. How you feeling? Fine. A woman's more likely to say, what's up? A man's more likely to say, great, get that brief on my desk at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, I need it, right? And if that sounds like law firm living or your experiences, well, there you have it. But I'll move on from that. And let's talk about how it is we process information, as I take about half an hour to cover a lot of material with you. The answer is there, that's Maud. The answer is there, which is, how are you making sense out of what I'm doing? So I'm sitting here and I'm giving you this information, what are you doing? Now, it doesn't mean, well, we see you, we hear you, that's not what that means. What it means is that while I'm presenting you information, you as human beings are processing in 3 ways. Visually, auditorily, and kinesthetically, or through feelings and reactions. That's what that means. Visually, what I mean is that while I'm doing this, you've got pictures and movies running through your mind all the time. Auditorily, you have sounds and conversations running through your mind all the time. Kinesthetic, you're having reactions. So, by the way, one of the reasons I mentioned Bill Clinton before and George Bush, very different figures, was because I wanted to say those so that you can now think back and think about what you did and what happened. When I said Bill Clinton, George Bush, did you start to see pictures in your mind? Did you see them? And here's what we know about the images and pictures, because it can be stills, it can be movies. The more you will react to something, the more you have a feeling about something or opinions about things, the more in color, vivid, live that image is. A movie. If you were at the Duke game last night, I talk about the Duke game, whatever. Some of you in your mind now, you've got the image, you've got the crowd, you've got sound, all sorts of things, because it's really alive for you. You weren't there, you didn't know, haven't seen the paper yet, don't know what happened, whatever. That image is likely to be less of a movie, more of a still. And if I were to talk to you about things that don't much matter to you, like what is your favorite Maria Openskaya film? Do you remember Maria Openskaya, Bill? Bill, do you remember Maria Openskaya? No. Do you remember? She was the lady in the Wolfman movies. Anyway, but there's the point. It is a dull full moon. But here's the point. When I said that name, most of you should have known that, most of you end up going, who, what? What's the image in your mind? Dark, blackness, not there, right? And or something very distant, very distant. The more something matters to you, the more in color, more in front, more large, more whatever, more vivid. The less something matters to you, the more black and white, the more distance, the more small. That's how you process visually. Everything that goes on, right? Bill Clinton, George Bush, Millard Fillmore. I talk about different things, we say different things. What happens? Now here's the point. You're doing all this stuff. You may not have before today thought about the fact that you do this, but once you do this, the message of this is you think that whatever it is you're doing, everybody's doing, but you're not. So we want to understand how this works. That's visual processing. Auditory processing, sounds and conversations running through your mind all the time. Sounds and conversations. So I say things and you're going, oh, I agree with that. Oh, wait a minute. What did he mean by that? Sounds and conversations running through your mind all the time. And kinesthetic feelings or reactions are just that. Oh, that's funny. Oh, that's sad. Oh, that makes me angry. The reactions that we have. Once again, Bill Clinton, George Bush, what's happening in you? Whatever it is about your processing. All right? The good news and the interesting news is that actually you give me a lot of clues as to what you're doing. And so if I'm communicating with you, I want to understand what you're doing so I can better manipulate my message. Manipulate not being a bad word, just means change my message in a way that makes sense for you and your reality, right? Here's some examples though, to sort of like, if you're still not sort of, what are you talking about here? Because this is everything you do in life. So here's just examples. You ever driving along in your car, you're trying to find somebody's house, but you can't find it, you're lost, and you yell at the person you're with to turn the radio off. You relate to that? Right? Turn the radio off. What sense does that make? You can't find the house, so I'm turning the radio off? Exactly. Because if you're an auditory, see, you do all 3 of these things, but you tend to be very strong at one of them, and you tend not to be strong at one of them. If you're strongly auditory, when you're driving down the street, you're going, where's that house? The address was 620. I can't find it. Turn the radio off, and essentially, if you were to finish that thought, you'd say, I can't hear myself think. And that's exactly what's going on. You've got to get rid of that distraction. A visual person who sort of has images, they're looking sort of just to match up as they go, they don't even know the radio's on. You go, oh, did you hear it? Wasn't that funny? Huh? I'm not listening. Because they're off to the movies as they're trying to find this place. Or you're sitting with friends around a bar or a restaurant, whatever, and somebody's got a great idea. Here's what we need to do for the firm. Great development. and they've got to show it to you on cocktail napkins. They've got to draw everything out. 15 napkins all over the place with lines, right? Now, of course, this might be you. Maybe you're like, yeah, I do that. But here's the thing. It's the person on the receiving end of that who goes, what's with the napkins? Would you just tell me what, because I'm not following the napkins. This is silly for me. Talk to me. What are you trying to tell me, right? Just kind of bottom line. For those of you that have retirement accounts and things like that, every quarter or so you get reports. How many of you like to, or whatever you might have, but how many of you, when you get these reports, you need to look at the pie charts and the bar graph and all this stuff. You love to look at that stuff. It helps you understand. And how do you say, am I making money? That's really, I know there's charts. Am I making money? Thank you very much. Talk to you next quarter, right? There are those of you who sort of bottom line things, and those of you who have to see visual versus auditory. Most people are visual or auditory. Kinesthetic is the smallest category of people. You have a friend, and you say, how you doing? And they have to go back to 1975 to answer the question. How you doing? You know, in 75, okay, all I needed was I'm fine. I mean, I'm just, oh, no, but let me, because a visual person has to run the movie for you. You know what I'm talking about, right? The person who gives you details, they could drive you nuts. Well, see, I'm primarily auditory. So somebody who's got to give me 47 details when all I needed is one, I don't know how to get out of there fast enough. But I also am aware that that's my auditory reaction to a visual person. On the other hand, if you're an auditory person, one of the things that I do as an auditory person, even when I'm telling you stories, you'll notice they're not these very long, all these, and I was wearing a blue suit. There's none of that kind of stuff. I sort of bottom line my stories. It's a very long story. Here's the bottom line to it. I've done that a couple of times today. I don't do that. That's what an auditory person does. Auditory person kind of goes right to the bottom line to it, right? So the question for you is, and we can go on and on with how it is, everything you do, the side of the bed you sleep on, do you notice that you've, and if those of you who either are married or not, or with somebody, but you notice you always sleep on the same side of the bed, and even when you go to a hotel, you're on the same side of the bed that you would be on at home? This all has to do with processing. It's all about favored size, what you do, and all of that. So there's sort of, everything you do is about how you process. You all do all three of these things, but you do them differently. Let me give you a real quick life experience just because some of you might go, well, what do I do? How do I know? Here's a quick example. Let's be visual for a moment. Take a moment and picture yourself sitting in your car behind the steering wheel, whatever you drive, Honda, whatever it may be. See yourself sitting behind the wheel and look ahead and look for the gas gauge. Is the gas gauge to the right or to the left of the steering column in your car? How many can see it? How many can't? Okay, now, it could be right or left. It could be either side. But if you can't see it, visual may not be your thing, and that may be tougher for you to do. Auditory. I actually had somebody who said, I can see myself sitting in the car, but I can't get my head in the window to look ahead for the gas gauge. We actually had to have her committed. But anyway, auditory. Take a moment and listen to the voice of somebody important to you in your life. Hear that person's voice on the phone and in person. And hear if you can distinguish whether their voice is louder over the phone or in person. How many can make the distinction? How many can't? How many saw that person's image in your mind when you did that exercise, which I did not ask you to do? So I said, hear the voice. If you supplied the image, it suggests you're probably more visual because you needed to do that. How many did not? How many just heard the voice without the image, didn't need the image? You were just hearing voices? It starts that way, I have to warn you. No, but that would be an auditory, that would be a strong auditory thing to be able to do. Kinesthetic, anybody here love chocolate? And when I mention chocolate, your reaction. Now, if you're tasting it, if you go, oh, chocolate, oh yeah, I mean, in fact, you know what, when's lunch? Is there a lunch with this thing? Because I want to get some, I'm really hungry, and I want whatever. And I can taste the chocolate, that's a kinesthetic reaction. If I'd said chocolate, and you started to just see Hershey bars in your mind and various things, visual reaction. If I said, who loves chocolate, and you started talking to yourself, ooh, I do, I wish I had some chocolate. Now that I think about it, can I sneak out of this room now and get, that's an auditory reaction. So here's the point. I do whatever I'm doing, and you're going to process however it is you process. And I don't know what you're doing. And that's why sometimes if you've ever ticked somebody off, you said something and you've angered them, and you don't know what you've done. What did I do? And you even reflect back. What did I say? What did I do? You absolutely dumbfounded as to why they're angry at you. It's not so much what you said as it is the way what you said triggered something in them. It could have been a filter, and it could have been the way that filter then showed itself in terms of images and all of that. Sometimes, for example, you know, have you ever talked to somebody and you're telling them something and then they come up with some story that you're like, where did that come from? That is so off the wall and so not related to what we're doing that I don't even know. And the point is, I don't have an answer except what you've done has triggered that. And it reminds them of that movie that now they have to tell you for whatever reason, because this is how we process information. So the next question is, how do we know what somebody's doing? The real mission, how do I do that? I'm a trial lawyer. I want to understand how my jurors are processing. You see, as a group, I've got to be able to get to you in all three processing modes. So how do I do that? Auditorily, visually, And kinesthetically, the stories and the different components which hopefully provide that sense of understanding. Now, if those of you who are primarily auditory, whenever any speaker begins to sort of say, let me tell you a story, you're like, oh, I'm out of here for this. Because I don't want to be, so you see the problem is if I've said anything that's sort of like, oh, I don't want to hear that, it's not me, it's you. It's all about how we process information. But a speaker's got to be able to recognize we've got to hit all three of those categories. So, how do we know what somebody's doing? A bunch of different ways. I'm just going to give you, and again, for the lawyers, the book has all sorts of things, but I'm going to give you three primary ways. One, word cues. We use words that indicate how we're processing. Visual people use visual words. Picture this. I see what you mean. I'm looking forward to the report. Show me. That's clear. Focus, people, focus. All of those are visual words and phrases. When somebody says, I don't see your point, it's what they mean. But see, the thing is, you'll translate that. If you're an auditory person, I say, I don't see your point, you'll respond to me by going, well, I don't know what your problem is. I mean, I've told you 17 times. Exactly. You've got to start, when somebody says, I don't see your point, that's exactly what they mean. They don't see it, and they need to. And you need to help them visually. Auditory people like me use auditory words. Listen up. Hear me out. Sounds great. That rings a bell. That clicks with me. That's what auditory people, the kind of phrases will say. Kinesthetic people, cool. Excellent. Huh? Kinesthetic people sort of use words and phrases that are reflective of their emotions at the time. Gestures. Visual people do a lot of drawing in front of their face. They have little Etch-a-Sketch pads here. You all know what do they still have Etch-a-Sketch? Okay. Etch-a-Sketch pads. And so here's the thing. So if I'm talking to Julia, and I'll go up and I'll say, Julia, now here's the thing. I've got this idea, but I think we should take it and let's divide it out, okay? Now, and the first part, let's not worry about that right now. What a visual person will do a lot of drawing in front of their face, okay? And they will parse things out. And that's fine. I'm visual. That's what I would do. But here's the thing. Julia, who's getting this information, maybe she disagrees with me, so she does this. Only now we've reversed roles. She goes, no, I disagree. And she erases my image. And that's what we'll do. So we'll go, no, we do this. And then she gets, you have a strong visual field. That's bothering you, isn't it? Yeah. I'll tell you why in a minute. But anyway, so that's the thing. So we erase the image, and then she gets all upset. I'm like, well, I didn't do anything. What did I do? And, well, yes, you did. You're in my face. You're erasing my image. How do you know if you have one of those strong visual fields like Julia? If you get very uncomfortable when people get too close to your face, like this, you will start to do what she's doing, which is pull back and start blinking. Now, it's not what's making Julia uncomfortable is not, this is not about, oh, that's socially inappropriate, you shouldn't stand that close to me. I don't think that's the issue because we're friends. But what's happening is she's going, no, you're in my face and I can't think because you're in my visual processing thing. That's the way you know if you have one. If somebody gets too close to you, you start doing one of these things, okay? The suggestion is you've got a strong visual processing mode. Now, I'm more auditory. You can come nose to nose with me and I don't care, right? There's nothing happening here. So auditory people would make great umpires. Yeah, we're right in top, but it doesn't matter to us because it's not where we process. Visual people, that's very important, and they gesture accordingly. Auditory people gesture at waist level. And you'll notice my gesturing is basically here. That's what auditory people do. In a listening position, auditory people will sit with hands to mouth or hands in a telephone position or with arms folded. The arms folded is interesting to me because sometimes if you said to me, hey, let's talk, and I, yeah, what's up? Or I'm all ears, right? And then some people find this to be an offensive position. The reality of it is this is actually an auditory person's way of listening. I'm sort of blocking everything out. I say, go ahead, I'm all ears. And that's exactly what I'm doing, listening intently. So that's what auditory people will do. The other thing auditory people will do, they'll keep a rhythm. So if you're sitting here and your foot is sort of keeping pace, or you're tapping a pen, or thank goodness you all don't have clicky pens because I am auditory, I hear that stuff. Sometimes I speak at conferences and it's in a hotel room and they give clicky pens. And the auditory people, just all throughout the presentation, click, 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 click. Because auditory people are like their own little metronomes. That's what they need to do. That's how they know they're okay. How you doing? I'm okay, because I'm fine. See, a nice little pattern here, right? And they have to keep a rhythm. That's what auditory people will do. Will keep a rhythm with themselves. That's auditory. Kinesthetic people will gesture very close to their body. So a kinesthetic person says, how do you do this to me? They go to their heart. What are you thinking? What were you thinking? And they go to their head. Boy, I could use some lunch. We're getting pretty close to lunch. When's this guy going to shut up? Because I'm kind of hungry, right? And they go to their stomach. Kinesthetic people gesture at their body parts that are an issue for them at the time. No, but that's essentially what they'll do, okay? So that's words, that's gestures. And here's the one that I think you'll have a lot of fun with if you play with this after we're done. which is, the next slide you have this, I won't leave it up here, but this is just it sort of capsulizes the gesture component. But beyond this, all right, there we go. We can also tell how you are processing information based on your eye movement. Now, my dog Mertz will help us with this, but he's not really a dog, he's human, so this works. We can determine where somebody is pulling information from and how they're processing based on the directions their eyes move. Cops use this, it's used in the military, whatever, but the truth is we should be using it as lawyers and as communicators to understand how best to get information across from people, because visual eye movement is upwards. And so if in fact I'm relating a movie to you and here's what's going on, here's what you'll see me do. Oh yeah, we went there, then we stopped at Disney, and then we went over, and you'll watch when visual people are just off to the movies. And eye movement upwards. Side-to-side eye movement is auditory information. Well, he said this, and then we talked about this, side-to-side. Now, by the way, when I do something like that's somebody sort of really locked in the movie. Most of our processing is our eyes moving all over the place, but there is a pattern to what your eyes will do. And so we just have to watch you. It doesn't take very long. I watch you for a couple of minutes, and pretty soon we see where you're pulling your information from. Upward eye movement is visual. Side-to-side is auditory. But also, and by the way, as you look at Mertz here, it's also looking at me. When our eyes come down into this direction, my left, your right, as you look at me, right? That's also auditory. Kinesthetic, or feeling, gets one location. It's sort of a grounding. Many of us will, before we speak, our eyes will go down here. It's sort of a grounding, like that feels right, and we'll do that before we speak. Just as one of the most, and I will go back to Clinton, not to be political, but the smallest category of people is kinesthetic, but Bill Clinton is primarily kinesthetic. 20% of us are primarily that, but he's one of them. So as a public figure, he's a good example of that. Because think about it. If you ever watch him do a press conference or answering questions and all of that, and regardless of what you think about him, most of you, if you were to describe him, would say he's emotional. You would use feeling-oriented words to describe him because that is his primary processing modes. But here's how when he gets a question, here's what you'll see him doing. You'll see him do this. Point is, what a kinesthetic person will do is, while he's getting the question, he begins at grounding. He's got to start from the point of feeling, like, all right, what's right? And then he will do other things. He will process to gather his answer, but he will ground and have a feeling sense both before and after he responds. You'll see him do this lip-biting thing. That's a kinesthetic thing to do, right? As opposed to, well, I don't know what Hillary is, but she's not the same thing, is she, right? Would you say she's kinesthetic? No. So what I'm saying is, even if you don't know what it is, you say, well, she doesn't do what he does. George Bush? No, not what he does. So as you sort of practice this and learn this, what is it they're doing? Start to watch them. You won't see George Bush getting questions do the same thing. You'll see Bush do far more auditory stuff, but also some visual, but it won't be kinesthetic. So again, and that's not judging anything. This is about how we process information. So visual eye movement. But what's really useful or interesting about this, we can also determine whether you're pulling information from your memory or whether you're making it up, which doesn't mean you're lying. It just means you're constructing information. Now, as a lawyer taking depositions, I use this all the time. It's really very critical for that. Because, here's the point. If I ask you, all right, what happened next? What did you see? What did they do? If I want to see you pulling information from memory, if you say, well, yeah, we saw that, and then he went into, if I see you're pulling information from memory, I know you're giving me your recollection. Well, wait a minute. But if I'm not checking memory, then I'm lying to you. No, you see, it doesn't work that way. Sometimes I might give you a socially appropriate answer. I'm not looking to lie. What were you wearing last Tuesday? I went to my office. I was wearing a suit. In other words, I don't check my memory. I visually construct what might very well be an appropriate answer. And I did this presentation in Alaska a while ago, and so I brought somebody up to demonstrate it, which we won't do today, but I asked him that question because we watched his eyes moves and all that, and I said, what were you wearing last Tuesday? And he said, he went visual construct. Well, I was at my office, so I was wearing a suit, but as we began to talk a little longer, he went visual remember, and he stopped himself and said, wait a minute, I've got to correct an answer. I just told you that I was in a suit. He goes, but I just remembered, I went fishing on Tuesday. So actually, I was wearing fishing gear, and that check of memory actually sent him back to correct the image. If I brought somebody down who was primarily visual, and I said, have you been to Disney? Describe Disney. The visual person goes, oh, well, there's topiary, and there's Cinderella's castle, and that, right? Ask an auditory person, have you been to Disney? Yeah. Well, describe it. Kids yelling, screaming. That's what you'll get. Auditory people will give much more clip, clip, screaming, yelling, sound-oriented information. The visual person will describe the topiary and all that kind of thing. Fascinating stuff. We can determine whether you are remembering, so it's remembering images, constructing them, pulling conversations from your memory. What'd you talk about? Well, I asked this, and as you're running the conversation from your memory, or, well, I don't know, general conversation about the weather and things. So it's not about lying. It's just about not checking memory and constructing what might be a socially appropriate answer. Auditory digital, that's your internal dialogue. Example, I wouldn't be saying this out loud, but here's what I'd be doing. Where are my keys? I put them, I had them on the table. Auditory digital, your eyes are down here while you're talking to yourself. The internal dialogue. So you can look at somebody and just sometimes you can say, you know they're talking to themselves. One of the things, but sometimes they're doing it loudly. But sometimes just watch. They're in this position. They're off into dialogue. Kinesthetic does not get a remember or construct component because we don't have to remember what feelings are. We feel them. If you're happy, you're happy. You're sad, you're angry, you're angry. The other thing that's interesting is all of your emotions actually register along the spinal column. They go out from there, but your original emotion actually registers and triggers in the spinal column. So by the way, think of a phrase like, oh, well, please, that sent chills down my spine. Exactly right. All right? So once again, we can look at people's eye movements. We can listen to the words they use. We can observe their gestures. And how do we put this together? Here's the most common processing combinations. Remember, 80% of us are auditory or visual. 2 out of 3 gets it. All right? You will tend to be consistent in 2 out of 3 of those channels. And so while there are more channels, as I said, the lawyers who've got the book, there's breathing, there's all sorts of other things that indicate this. But for our general purposes, 2 out of 3 gets it. Auditory eye movement, auditory words, and kinesthetic gestures is the most popular combination of people, which means that person is primarily auditory. Visual eyes movements, visual words, kinesthetic gestures, the second most common combination. But you can interact with somebody, watch those 3 things, and after a while, it'll only take you a couple of minutes to basically say, you know, you're primarily visual, you're primarily auditory. You may already have that sense about yourself, but you don't want to confuse this. Sometimes people say, oh, I'm auditory, I talk on the phone all the time. It doesn't work that way. My real question to you would be, but when you're on the phone, what's going on in your head? For example, I'm sure you've either all had a blind date or you're going to have a blind date, but let me ask this question. Is there anybody here who is talking to somebody on the phone, it might be professionally, whatever, but anybody who's talking to somebody on the phone that you've never met and you don't know what they look like, you haven't Googled them, you don't know what they look like for sure? Anybody relate to that? Well, let me just pick on Tommy here for a second. So Tommy, is that person a man or a woman in your head? A woman? And now, do you have an image of that person?
Yeah.
Okay, just quick description. Blonde hair, dark hair, what?
Dark hair, light skin, really pretty.
Okay, okay. Tall, short?
Medium.
Medium. All right, and when you're talking to her on the phone, professional dress, casual dress, what do you see?
Professional.
Okay, now, Tommy's having a hallucination, all right, because the person he's got, remember, that is who he is negotiating with, right, or talking to or interacting with. The reality of it is, if Tommy meets that person, she could turn out to be absolutely the opposite. And that's why I go back to the blind date example. Because I'm sure most of you, if you've had a blind date, and they said, oh, yes, I'm blonde hair, blue-eyed, whatever, and you get this combination, and then you meet and you go, oh, I didn't know it came in this particular combo. Not that they didn't say the same thing about you. We don't know. But you know. But the point is, and the reason for that is, oh, you're not what I thought, or you are. It's the power of processing. I just give you these examples to show you, you know, you're right when I am surprised when I meet somebody, but I didn't even know what they looked like, but you did. You created the image of what they looked like. And I once had a lawyer who said to me, she came up during a break, she said, you know, I'm negotiating with somebody and he's really intimidating to me. I don't know how to handle him. Have you met him? No. Know what he looks like? No. What does he look like to you? And she describes the Terminator. He could kill me. It's Schwarzenegger and a good day, you know, that kind of thing. The reality of it is, I said, but for all you know, it's Pee Wee Herman, right? You don't know. She goes, well, you're right, but it's not the image I have. Change the image. Right? If you've got somebody pictured who is intimidating to you, that's why, and by the way, how many of you, among the lawyers or professionals, whatever you're doing, students, how many of you, if you're talking to somebody, will Google, you'll do what you can to try and find an image of that person to supply that information for yourself? If you don't, yeah, and you will, and I see the lawyers recognize their hand, because a lot of times we say, I need to know who I'm dealing with. I want to know. I want to supply that information for myself. Okay. The second kind of piece that I want to give you just to play with, you can learn more about this in the future and all that. I just want to introduce you to some things. Starts with this premise that we're primates first and college educated second. And what this means is that because so much of what we're talking about, it's innate human behavior. This stuff doesn't work because we're really bright people who have law degrees. This stuff works because we're primates, because this is primate behavior. Because you walk down the hallway and say, how you doing? Somebody goes, good, how you doing? Morning, morning. You ever have somebody go, how you doing? Good, how are you? And then you say, why did I say that? Because in fact, I don't feel. I'm not, but you can't help it. Because when we're in rapport with somebody, when we're when we're in rapport, there's a matching and mirroring thing that goes on. It's something natural. It happens naturally. And it happens in these ways. So I want to talk about that because here's the point. while it happens naturally, my point of dealing with this as a communication piece is that it also has to happen, or can happen, strategically. All right? It can also happen strategically. And by the way, for those of you who are in tune, I'm just going to say this, I am aware of the clock because I'm going to go till 12. I was told to go till 12:25 because the lawyers need a certain amount of credit and all that kind of stuff. Sorry about that. And I'm saying that because I think this was the original end time, but we started 10 minutes late, so I'm just going to go 10 minutes. I'm just debriefing you in case there are people going, does this guy not know that we're supposed to be wrapping up at 12:15? So that's what's happening. Watching the clock. Okay. So matching and mirroring is a natural process, but it's also can be a strategic process. By the way, in terms of the natural process, you're on a plane. What do you do when you get on a plane and somebody comes on who you don't want to interact with? Just think about what you do, right? Well, you'll sit down and you'll turn your body to the right. You'll turn kind of to the side of the plane. You'll open a book and not make it. You'll do all these things to send the message, leave me alone. And you'll do it with your voice. So they come on and go, how you doing? Okay. Right? So where you going? Same place you are, idiot. I mean, plane. Well, maybe you don't say that. But you'll get this lot of, so you're going on a business trip? Yeah. So my point is what you're hearing, if you remove the words, you hear somebody singing, da-da-da-da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da-da, ba-da. That mismatch in tone, in position, because by the way, it's amazing how when a flight attendant comes by, can I bring you something? Why, yes, I'd like a Coke, please. Right? How come you're happy? Oh, you're having a Coke? Yeah. That's what we do. We use our voice, our body, all these things to basically say, leave me alone, don't interact with me. So now, as lawyers, we want to build relationships. We can do it strategically. It happens naturally, and we often will want to break that naturally when we choose to, but strategically we can develop rapport. One of the issues the panel dealt with this morning, and it was a question that came up with, how do you deal with people who are really tough to deal with, right? And of course, one of your deans, yesterday's New York Times, has an article of Dean Bruce, right, who was in there. He was quoted in there and about how to deal with tough people, so pick up yesterday's New York Times. But anyway, the bottom line is, the more we are like somebody, the more comfortable they are with us. Have you ever met somebody, you've gone to a conference, you meet somebody, and you're like, wow, I feel like I've known you my whole life? You're reacting to behavior. You're not reacting to, well, no, I think you're just a nice person. No, people like people who are like themselves. That's why if I say, how you doing? Good, how you doing? That's that matching, mirroring thing that it's natural. So one of the things we can do strategically is to match and mirror others with whom we're communicating. Now, does that mean if somebody is angry with you and yells at you that we should yell back? No, that's not what I'm talking about, right? Matching negative stuff isn't going to get us anywhere, but you're not too far off base. Because if you look and say, I'm so angry at you, I'm going to deal with you, what I want to do is match pieces of what you're doing. What are the pieces of that vocal channel? Volume, rate, pitch, tone. So I might match the volume, but not your tone. You know, we're going to deal with that. We're going to deal with it. In other words, I try and disarm you. The problem is I don't match even the volume, you walk on me. I'm so angry at you. All right, what did I do? Yeah, exactly right. Because that mismatch is so clear that some people are ready to walk on top of you. So we match certain pieces. Now, let me just give you some of the easier ways. Body position. You know, I can almost look around, you can tell people who are friendly and know each other and whatever, and if you sort of look, you'll find that people who you are in rapport with or are friends of yours sit just like you do. And even if you're not friendly with it, are you friends? You know each other, whatever? Okay, it's not surprising because you're like little bookends throughout the whole time. You sit back with your arms folded, you're back with your arms folded. And what you'll notice is when one person moves, the other person will follow you. It's natural behavior. So you won't work now because everyone's starting to change position. I'm not sitting like you. But when you go to your next class, start to do this. Watch how people around you, if you're in rapport with them and there's sort of connections, watch how you're sort of like all leaning forward. And then lean back. Watch them follow, right? It's human behavior. It's primate behavior. When you're in rapport, it's going to happen. Now, what if they didn't follow me? Then you're not in rapport. When you're in rapport, you will find, just like when you go up to somebody, and if I were talking to you and we were having a nice conversation and I did that, the odds are you're going to do that. You're just going to do it. That's like gorillas in a zoo? Yeah. We're just smarter. Maybe. I don't know. But that's the point. And you'll watch, that's the primate behavior. I do this, you will do that. I have a friend, Julie, and I always look at her and I'll say, you know, you always do what I do. And she says, I do not. She's like the instant primate. I do not. She's right back. I said, well, you just did it. No, I didn't. Yes, you did. We can match body position. So you're with somebody, you're in a job interview, you're with somebody who's like intimidating for you. Begin to match and mirror their position. They're leaning back in their chair because they're powerful and they're leaning back and doing all these kind of things. Lean back in your chair. Now again, I'm not talking about challenging. See, sometimes I teach this and I see people later, oh, that mimicking stuff you taught us. I practiced that. No, mimicking is annoying. Mimicking are two kids that repeat each other till somebody screams. This is not mimicking. This is matching and mirroring. Lean back, but it means you're creating a similarity, a sameness. In terms of words, phrases, very powerful. People have words and phrases that mean a lot to them. Most people, you all have words and phrases you use all the time, and you don't even know you do. People would have to tell you what your phrases are. I've had people tell me that I use the word candidly, different things I didn't even know I used. Now, once they do that, of course, now it's out there for play. What's really powerful, how many of you, by the way, as you sit here, you've got friends that if I said a certain word or phrase, they're in your head. You know exactly who it is. Most of us have that, right? Words and phrases and different things. And that they may not even know that they use. I have a friend who uses the word agitate to mean excited. So she lives in Vegas, and I said, oh, I'm coming out to lecture in Vegas. Oh, I told the kids they're so agitated you're coming. If they're ticked off, I won't show up. Don't worry about it. I won't. But that's not what she meant. She said, so one of the ways of building rapport is we use words and phrases of other people that they use the way they use them. So I can talk to her another time and say, oh, you know what? I'm so agitated. It's 2 days before I leave. Oh, I know. So are we. It sounds like a bunch of angry people getting together. But I'm simply using a phrase, a word that she uses, and I'm using it the way she uses it. One of my favorite examples of this is I was talking to an insurance group, and somebody said they had a supervisor who uses the phrase cheese and rice. I said, what? I said, how is it used? Well, if he's looking at a file and something goes wrong, he'll go, cheese and rice. Some of you are getting that. Others will explain it later. But here's the thing. I said to her, well, now, do you ever use that phrase? She goes, oh, no, I wouldn't do that. I said, but wait a minute. If you were looking at a file and there was something wrong and you went cheese and rice, what would happen? Oh, he'd be over going, what's wrong? Exactly. By using words and phrases that other people use the way they would use them, very powerful. One last one, because a lot of you are law students going to be lawyers. This was a young associate who told me that he had a partner, and the way the partner would come into his office, she would bring in projects every night, like at 7. He's like trying to get out of the office, 7 o'clock, bless you, and she would walk in and dump what she referred to as a learning opportunity on his desk. Here was a learning opportunity for you. And I asked, is it sarcasm? She says, oh, no. She means it. It's a learning opportunity, and that's the way she views life. Do you use that phrase back to her? He goes, oh, I don't know. I don't view it as a learning opportunity. Right, but that's the point. He was coming up for review. I said, imagine the power. When she says, okay, tell me about the last 6 months or year. How's it going? And he goes, well, I've been thinking about just all the learning opportunities I've had. And it's been just by using the phrase, using the word. Do not be surprised to have that other person just be with you. And not going, aha, use my word. They don't even know they're doing it. They don't know they use that phrase. Use that word and phrase. So for the lawyers who've got clients oftentimes have words and phrase. I've been ripped off. Use the phrase. Use their words. Client value words is a slide coming up. Use client value or criteria words. As a jury selection person, I listen to the jury selection. When I hear certain jurors, prospective jurors, use words or phrases or tell some story that's true, I will pass my client lawyer a note. Use this, work it into the opening, work it into the closing. Just remember this word, remember this phrase. And here's who you want to look at when you use it, because it's meaningful for that person. That's the way you can use this stuff strategically. Sleight of mouth is just a quick technique I'll give you as we have just a couple of minutes left. It's a linguistic thing, but whenever anybody connects, because this happened, it means this, and they create a causal connection to it, sleight of mouth is a linguistic technique, which is really kind of fun. It helps you break the if A, then B. I'll just give you a quick example. Julia, you invite me to your house for dinner and I show up late, so Julia looks at me and says, you're late, so you don't care. Now, of course, I'm disturbed that she connects my being late to not caring. As a professor might be concerned, if you show up late to class, they assume you don't care. These sleight of mouth techniques can be used to break that connection. I'll just demonstrate a couple of them. The unreality predicate, I look at Julia and say, so it appears to you that being late means I don't care. In other words, she goes, well, yeah, that's the way it looks to me. Well, that which is a visual kind of strategy to try. What I'm trying to do is bring the connection into question. It looks that way. Well, there might be another picture we need to deal with. One of my favorite examples, I was early last week. Does that mean I cared more? No, it doesn't mean. And then my favorite one, usually guys like this one, at least if you're in a relationship, switching referential index. It means when you expect the other person to wear the standard they're putting on you. So, in other words, Julia, you're late, so you don't care. So I look at her and go, so if you were late, you wouldn't care. She goes, no. With me, I would have a reason. Exactly. Right? So I have that reason too. So anyway, you can read more about that or do more research, but that's sort of an interesting technique. I'll leave you now in my last minute here with, whenever we learn a new skill or learn something new information, we go through steps, if you will, steps or stages of learning. I'm going to use driving a car just to help make this slide go very quickly because it's a great way to make an example. But this is how we learn. We start, before you ever get in a car and drive it, you can't drive and you don't even know you can't drive. That's called unconscious incompetence, right? It's a skill you don't have and you're not even aware you don't have it. Then you get in the car for the first time and hit a wall. That's called conscious incompetence, right? I now got in the car and realized I can't drive. Conscious incompetence. So what do? You take driver's ed. You read rules of the road, all of these things. You go in the car, you practice, your parents take you out, et cetera, and you rise to a level known as conscious competence, right? In other words, wow, I'm keeping between the lines. I get this. I'm consciously competent in what I can do. And then, after you've been driving quite a while, what happens? You reach a level of unconscious competence. It's just something you do. Just something you know how to do and you do well, and it's really not an issue. So where I'm sort of leaving you today with a lot of this VAK information, visual, auditory, kinesthetic, is sort of an invitation to learn more. It's probably the level of conscious incompetence. The level of saying, well, there's all that stuff, what do I do? So it's an invitation to learn more, read more, and all of that. To ask yourself these questions as you move through in the profession in an ethical way, but also in terms of what guides you. What really is life all about for you? Why is this profession? Are you about justice in the future? Was it about the money? What is taking you here? And I don't judge any of those answers. I simply say be in touch, as the panel was telling us this morning. Be in touch with what your vision is, what your passion is, and be sure you proceed. I leave with this, just a quote that I like, since this is also part of a send you a message kind of thing, which is the future's not a gift, it's an achievement. And as law students, certainly, but as lawyers who have great careers, I mean, I think that's really true. It's what we work at and what we make happen that's really critical. The last slide, if you have any questions or information, feel free to just send me an email. I'm happy to do that. You've all been so kind for the last hour and a half or so. Thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of the day. Thanks.